begin your simple sign transfer, take the image that you've printed, place it ink side down on your surface, smooth it out, and then take tape, scotch tape or painter's tape, and secure it to your surface so that it doesn't slide or move as you begin the water transfer process. Now that you have your image firmly in place, let's pull together a few items that we're going to need to pull together this project. First, you'll need a small paintbrush. Then you'll need water to dip your paintbrush in. You'll need a permanent marker, a paper towel, and a permanent paint pen. Next, you'll dip your paintbrush in the water and carefully trace the first letter in your sign. Don't use too much water, just a little bit of water will do. Next, you're going to take your permanent marker and you simply need the cap end with the cap on and gently rub over the letter itself in the water. As you do, you'll begin to see the letter show through your paper, and that'll help you know that the ink itself is being transferred onto your surface. Try and stay within the line of the letter itself, and not go too far outside to prevent the ink from smearing onto, in this case, the white backdrop. Continue with the next letter, and again, I would just do these letters one at a time and just use a small amount of water, not too much. You'll play around and you'll find out what works best for you. But after a little trial and error, I know that too much water creates a lot of ink spread underneath the paper itself, and we don't want that because that just ends up being something that we're going to have to clean up later. Continue to work left to right if you are right-handed, and if you're left-handed, you may want to work right to left across your sign to help prevent some of the smearing that can happen when your hand drags across the workspace. And then work from top to bottom until you've completed all of the letters in your transfer. This process does take a little time, but this particular sign is a bit more detailed than perhaps your sign may be. So don't get discouraged by the time it takes. And I would just encourage you to work slowly, don't hurry, and try and do a good job with this step, and you'll end up with a much better transfer in the end. Once you've carefully traced your letters with water and walked through the rubbing process, carefully pull up your image away from your sign backdrop. And there you should see your image transfer. Now that you completed your image transfer and it's dry, we're going to start working with our permanent paint pens. And these pens can be found at places like Walmart or your local craft store. And we're actually going to make this image permanent. Shake your pens up well, and then go ahead and start tracing the transfer that you've created. Carefully trace and fill in your transfer. And you're going to want to work. And at this point in time, I kind of started from the middle just to get a feel for what it was going to look like. But you're going to want to go ahead and fill in all of those letters with your paint pen, and then you want to make sure you let them dry fully before you continue on to the next step. Once your ink transfer has dried, go back in with your permanent paint marker, fill in all of those letters, allow them to dry completely, and then go back over those letters with a damp paper towel just to remove any excess ink from your original transfer. And here you'll see how that paint transfer just makes my sign come to life. For my project, I've chosen to use Annie Sloan Pure White Chalk Paint, Valspar Antiquing Glaze, Painter's Permanent Paint Pens, Annie Sloan Wax, and Amy Howard at Home Wax, and a couple of different appliques I found at my local hobby store. So up to this point, we've done our water and rub transfer of our image, and then we've taken the opportunity to use a paint pen and actually fill in that transfer with the paint pen so that it's nice and has a dark, rich color so that it's easily visible from a distance. And then allow that to dry. After that's dry, I like to go in with a wet or damp paper towel and just gently go over each of the letters or your image if you decide to use an image or a graphic of some kind to wipe away any excess ink that may be there from your transfer. It wipes off very easily and it won't ruin your sign in any way. Allow that again to dry completely. And then at this point in time, we need to, number one, take a look at the backdrop itself. Mine is painted. It's painted with a chalk paint, and chalk paint doesn't always self-level. So if it gets a little bit dried out, it may be kind of wavy or bumpy in the background and need to be flattened out a little bit. So I'm going to go back and actually do a little bit of sanding of my sign to take off some of those bumps so it's a little bit smoother. And then if you like to distress your sign and want your letters to be distressed, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go actually out to my garage and I'm going to use my orbital sander to do some gentle sanding on the back of my sign, but you could also just use sandpaper. It's simple, it doesn't take a lot of time, and it doesn't have to be an expensive step. Also know that it's not a required step. If your backdrop itself is nice and flat, it's not painted, or if you don't care for the distressed look for this particular project, then the sandpapering paper portion is not necessary at all. And then after we finish our sanding, we're going to go ahead and put some kind of finish as sort of a protective coat on this. My suggestions are a couple of things. You can do a polyacryl. I like to work with polyacrylic because it's water-based, easily washes out of my paintbrushes. I don't have to worry about having turpentine and that kind of thing in my house. If you do use a polyacrylic, I would encourage you to use something that has a flat or a matte finish or a flat finish instead of a semi-gloss or a gloss. Our semi-glosses and glosses are going to create a glare on our signs. And we don't want to have that. You want to actually be able to read the sign when you walk up to it. So definitely look for a matte finish. I'm actually going to do a finish that is a wax-based finish. I've got a light wax and a dark wax. I'm going to kind of combine the two and hopefully come up with something artistic, and I'll show you a little bit about how I do that. So a couple things probably just to talk about as we wrap up. There are a few pitfalls in this project, and I've done this project a couple of times myself, so I can help you avoid some of these pitfalls. First one is remember to use a background that is a dark color. or I'm sorry, that is a, let's start. Remember to use a background that's a light color, not dark in color, because your ink, when you do that ink transfer, is not going to transfer well, and it's going to be really difficult for you to see it. I have to apologize, but my dog is chewing on my camera stand right now. So if I'm wiggling a little bit, we can thank the dog. Okay. All right. Let's see. So that's pitfall number 1. All right, pitfall number 2 is to make sure when you go back to fill in your transfer, your ink transfer, make sure that you use a permanent paint pen. The first time I did it, I didn't use permanent. I went over the top of it with a polyacrylic at the very end, and I smeared the whole thing and had to start all over again. So that's important as well. The next pitfall is your background. If you use a paint like a chalk paint, like I did, and it's not completely flat and you don't love the look of it, go back in with a little bit of sandpaper and gently, you can sand around your letters, or you can sand the whole thing if you don't mind a little distressing on your letters, to get that backdrop flat. Also remember that you can go in if some of that ink that you put on at the very beginning with the water runs. Don't try and wipe it off until after you've allowed that to dry. Then you've gone in and filled with your paint marker and allowed that to dry, or your paint pen, permanent paint pen. And once that's dry, then go in gently with a paper towel and wipe away that excess ink. I didn't have any trouble with mine coming off, so it'll clean it up really nicely. And the final pitfall is to make sure that you're using a hanger that's appropriate for the weight of your sign. If you're using something that's really lightweight, like a softwood, like a pine, there are lots of hanger options available for you. If you're using something heavier, like that original hickory sign that I was working with, make sure that you have the appropriate hangers on the back. You don't want this thing falling off the wall in the middle of the night. I have a story. I had a beautiful heirloom mirror that my grandmother had given to me, and put some hangers on the back of it, wired it up, hung it on the wall in the middle of the night. Heard this loud crash, and Grandma's mirror was destroyed. So it's really important to make sure that you put the appropriate hangers for the appropriate weight on the back of your project. So then, just to kind of recap, you're going to have your backdrop. In this particular case, this is pine. It's nice and lightweight. I did design the shape of it and cut out the shape and used a router to create this beautiful edge to it. But you can purchase pre-made wood signs in the store if you'd like to go that route, or you can, if you saw my last video, you can actually create your own using some wood floor tiles, and I encourage you to go back to video number 2 if you missed that to see how you can do that. The one thing I'll remind you of is that this process of the image transfer with water does not work. Sorry, that's my dog. So just keep in mind that this transfer process works best on light color surfaces. So if you've got a light color pine, natural wood of some kind that hasn't been stained or hasn't been stained very dark, or if you've got a surface like this that's been painted with a chalk paint or acrylic paint, make sure it's a light color, and this process will work well with it. If it's dark, unfortunately, it's not going to show up well, and you'll be frustrated and disappointed as I was. So, and we'll have another video where I'll show you what you might be able to do with that flooring backdrop, what kind of sign you might be able to create with that. So that'll come up at another time. So I went ahead and waxed the background after I sanded it. I used a black wax, an Annie Sloan black wax, an Annie Sloan clear wax, I think, or light wax, and then I have one other brand that I use that's an antiquing wax. So I use the 3 of those just because I like to be artistic and play a little bit, but you don't have to do any of the waxing at all. You could just simply put that polycryl on like I talked about. That'll give it a nice finish. Let's see. I did pick a couple of the appliques. Those you can pick up at your local big box hardware store. They're just wood. I painted them and added a little bit of a silver fleck to them so that they stand out a little more. And then I purchased this metal flower. It was a different color. I painted it with the chalk paint and also add some of those silver touches to that, just so it pops out a little bit from the sign. So that's it. I do want to remind you to make sure that when you are After you've done the transfer itself of the ink and you're going back in and you're filling in your transfer, make sure you use a permanent pen. Permanent is important. If it's not permanent, it's going to wipe off or wash off when you go back to try and clean up those spaces around where there might be a little bit of ink, or if you do like I did, you go in to put a polycryl on top of it and it smears all of your lettering. So I learned that lesson too. So learn from me, it'll go quicker and easier for you. And this particular brand of paint pens, I actually just bought at Walmart. The first ones I bought at a craft store, an art store, and didn't realize I probably need to check on that permanent part. So these are available. These are called Painters Express Yourself, and they come in all kinds of different colors. So you might consider that. I mentioned Annie Sloan on the backdrop. The edges here are simply a, what did I use? A Valspar antiquing glaze. It looks beautiful on the wood. It's not too rich and too heavy. It's a little lighter than paint, so you can kind of see a little bit of the grain of the wood, so I think it's really beautiful. And then on the back, don't forget to add your hooks of some kind. Right now I've got a couple of hooks here. I need to add some wire, so this will be ready to go. Or on this sign or any sign, you might use a big pretty ribbon hanging from your hooks or something along those lines. So that's it. It's simple, it's easy, it's something that you can do. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You can do this really, really inexpensively, and really the key to me is the customization piece, that you can make this say whatever you'd like. This is something that I'm doing for a friend who's special, and I think it might be meaningful to her at this point in time. So I'm gonna make a delivery. I want to thank you for joining me for this tutorial today. And encourage you to create and to create for friends. Do something nice for someone today. My motto is be the reason that someone smiles today. The sign that I'm making is actually something that I'm making for a friend, and hoping it'll be something that is a blessing to her. So I encourage you to do the same. Put a smile on somebody's face with a creation that you've come up with, or this will make great gift ideas for the holidays. So start to think about some things that you might be able to do for your friends and family for Christmas with signage. It's simple, it's inexpensive, it can be beautifully personalized and done by you, done by your hand. I think it's a beautiful thing. So thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Again, be the reason that someone smiles today. Take care. Say goodbye. Say goodbye. Here. Say goodbye. Amazon affiliate products you see in this video are available through purchase through the comment section. Take a minute to subscribe to H2 Home Designs on YouTube and make sure you hit the bell so you receive all our latest updates.